Sports, music, literature, art, drama. I am not ashamed to say that I am a worldly Christian. I love the created realm. And what's more, I especially love the highest expression of God's created realm, human beings. I love the way that their powers and their gifts and their abilities and their skills reflect the image of God, and how even now, amidst our fallen world, they anticipate that day in the new creation when our humanity will achieve the fullness of its God-intended potential without any limitations whatsoever.
Good morning, Bezel T3. That was Art Azurdia, Senior Minister of Word and Worship at Trinity Church of Portland, Oregon, preaching a sermon entitled, A Clarion Call to Worldly Christianity. Worldly Christianity? Wouldn't that be a bad thing, to be a worldly Christian? Friends, I present a lot of stinkers on my channel in order to alert you of just how far afield much of evangelical Christianity has drifted. But Christ Church will always prevail in this world, and there will always be faithful pastors and teachers to be found. Art is definitely one of them. I have condensed this sermon, which was given at the Aspire Conference at Faith Bible Church in Spokane, Washington in 2013. I will, however, provide a link below in the info section for the entire sermon, which you would be well advised to take advantage of. So, without further explanation, here is Pastor Azurdia.
We will not one day, by virtue of the work of Jesus Christ, exist as saved souls, redeemed ghosts. We will be saved human beings with all of the sinless physicality that goes along with being truly and fully human. It is in this sense that the Christianity of the Bible is red-blooded. It is earthy. It recognizes that this world has been created by God, it exists for God, and its greatest significance to God has been made evident by the fact that God Himself in Jesus Christ has invaded the world by becoming a vital part of it, by becoming a flesh and blood human being. It is this same Jesus who prays for us and says, Father, I'm not asking that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. In fact, just as you sent me into the world, so I am sending them into the world. This, my friends, is precisely where Jesus Christ intends for us to be, with both feet firmly planted in the world. And so I want to be a worldly Christian. I've trained my children to be worldly Christians.
Now, indeed, Christians have dual citizenship. As humans, we are born into this fallen world. But once the Christian is born again, our true home is with God. Colossians 3:1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, you will also appear with Him in glory. And yet, along with that reality, we know that as long as God has Christians in this world, they are to engage with this world and let the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ shine before others, so that the world may see the good works of Christians and give glory to the Father who is in heaven. Now, Art is going to be preaching from Hebrews chapter 4. Being in this world but not of it, well, it has consequences. It's not easy to be a true confessing Christian in this fallen world. Christians will have opposition, just like those in whom the writer of Hebrews was addressing.
Now you see, this was the very dilemma that is facing the Hebrew Christians. You've now stepped into their world. They are living under extraordinary social pressure. Oppression by the Roman government, a pressure from their own Jewish families who have now renounced them by virtue of their embracing of Jesus Christ. And in the midst of all of this, facing the very real temptation to relinquish their grasp of the gospel.
And this is the writer's concern from the beginning of his letter. Hebrews 2:1, therefore we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. See, the writer to the Hebrews says, don't drift, stay the course and persevere in the faith.
It's not the time to fall back. It's not the time to let go. Now is not the time to renounce what you have confessed with your lips. He may, in fact, friends, be reminding them of the occasion of their baptism when they publicly acknowledged Jesus Christ as Kurios, as Lord. Don't renounce that now. Don't turn your back on that now. Don't yield to the temptation to give up. Hold on firmly to what you have proclaimed. Keep persevering. And to encourage you, despite all of the opposition that is coming down upon you, to encourage you to that very end, let me tell you that right now, at the right hand of God himself, is a man.
The man, Jesus the Messiah, the great, great high priest who intercedes for believers in heaven right now. Think of the contrast between the arduous, continual, ongoing work of the Old Testament priests in the temple with the once-for-all work of the Lord Jesus Christ.
What is it that distinguishes Jesus Christ to be the greatest of all priests, and thus, my friends, worthy of your absolute, total, and comprehensive allegiance? So compelling that you cannot let your grip on him go. Well, here's the first. He is the effectual priest. He is the effectual priest. What is it that makes this priest so great? He is the effectual priest in that he has accomplished what all other priests could only prefigure.
All the Old Testament furniture, if you will, points to Jesus. The Exodus, the land of Canaan, the temple and all its activities, the priesthood, the prophets and the kings. Now let's consider the priests and their elaborate work in the temple.
So why all of the ritual? Why all the drama and the routine? Because all of it every year served to paint a picture before the eyes of God's people. It served to prefigure what would one day be accomplished in actuality by the greatest of high priests. He would shed his blood on the cross. He would be buried in a tomb. He would be raised on the third day. After 40 days of ministry in his resurrected body, he would ascend into heaven. He would pass from the sight of his followers, not through the veil, but through the heavens into the very throne room of God himself. And how do we know this morning that the offering of his own blood for the sins of his people was acceptable to God? Because when he got there was no rush to get out. When the author says that Jesus has passed through the heavens, he stresses an action that has taken place in the past that has ongoing results. In other words, Jesus Christ has gone through the heavens and he is still there at the Father's right hand. Moreover, my friends, when he got there, he did something that no priest ever before in the history of redemption had ever done. He sat down. No priest was ever allowed to sit down. In the furniture of the tabernacle, there's not a bench, there's not even a stool, not even a chair. Why? Never appropriate for a priest to sit. Why? Because his work of making atonement was never accomplished. This priest sat down, the definitive physical expression of it is finished. Salvation accomplished, redemption paid in full.
Now, here's the second thing that makes the Lord Jesus better than any other priest.
There is a second fact that distinguishes his greatness, his superiority to all other priests, and that is, he is the ultimate priest. He is the ultimate priest. That is, he possesses a stature like no other priest before or after. He possesses a stature like no other priest either before him or after him. Who is this priest? What is his identity? Well, the author here reminds us. Notice, Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus, the Son of God. Now those two words, friends, they're not accidental. They're not some kind of rhetorical flourish, some literary creativity. These two words are filled with meaning, conveying two features that distinguish him as the ultimate priest. Jesus, stressing his full humanity. The Son of God, stressing his full deity. Because you see, what makes a mediator effective is his acceptability to both parties needing to be reconciled to each other. Hence, there could never be a priest any more effective than this priest. As God, he can speak to God on equal terms. As a human, he knows how to represent us perfectly. It's what theologians refer to as the hypostatic union, the doctrine of the two natures in one human being. It's a mystery beyond our ability to comprehend, rivaled only perhaps by the doctrine of God's three-in-oneness. Now, if you happen to be familiar with the letter of Hebrews, you know that this title simply pulls together two truths about Jesus that the Hebrew writer has already taken a great deal of pain to establish. In chapter 1, he stresses the deity of Jesus Christ in terms that you will not find to be stronger anywhere else in all of the Bible. In chapter 2, with equal exuberance, he stresses the full humanity of Jesus in equally plain terms. But the reason why he has worked so hard at all of this is because all along he knew he was headed here, where these two natures mysteriously converge in one person, Jesus, the Son of God, the ultimate high priest, perfectly qualified to bridge the gulf between a holy God and a fallen humanity.
Oh man, how different is that from a lot of the evangelical claptrap we hear on Christian TV and radio? I will now present a sad statistic that cannot be ignored.
And one of those statistics is this, that young people in American evangelical churches, just like this one, are fleeing the church in unprecedented numbers. Young people 15, 16, 17, 18, as quickly as they possibly can, leaving churches like this. And as adults recognize this going on, very often well-meaning adults, to be sure, but naive in their thinking, make conclusions like this. Well, young people are leaving the church in unprecedented numbers because, quite frankly, the youth group isn't cool enough. Quite frankly, the music isn't contemporary enough. Quite frankly, the technology isn't sophisticated enough, so they're leaving. They mean well, but they're profoundly naive because, my friends, young people, though they are leaving the church in unprecedented numbers, are not leaving because the youth group isn't cool enough. They're not leaving because the music isn't contemporary enough. They are not leaving because the technology isn't sophisticated enough. They are leaving because our portrait of Jesus Christ has not been compelling enough. We have not showed to them that Jesus Christ is better than everything, better than everyone, that he is better than money, he is better than power, he is better than sex. We have convinced them that Jesus is a Savior to meet their every needs. And then we wonder why it is that so few young people want to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. And then when he doesn't live up to my expectation, well, I can find another, or I can do without. The Puritans called it the expulsive power of a new affection. When you recognize Jesus Christ for who he really is in all of his majestic glory and splendor, in the fullness of his manhood, in the fullness of his godhood, you won't leave him because you can't leave him.
You know, the disciples ran into this very dilemma. In John chapter 6, after Jesus spoke some very hard sayings to the crowd that followed him after he had fed thousands of them with a few loaves of bread and some fish, we read in verse 66, after this, these hard sayings, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So Jesus turned to the 12 and said, "Do you want to go away as well?" And Simon Peter answered him. He says, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life."
He is the effectual priest. He is the ultimate priest. Thirdly, distinguishing his greatness, he is the sympathetic priest. He is the sympathetic priest. In that he has endured the full force of temptation's power. Notice that the author here says the same thing twice, once negatively, once positively, but the same thing. Verse 15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. There it is in the negative. Same thing now in the positive, but we do have one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Now I'll tell you why this is important. Some of these Hebrew Christians who are facing the realities of violent persecution, they have been imprisoned, they've experienced the confiscation of their property, they've known unbelievable hostility and abuse, they're beginning to wonder to what extent Jesus, who is now returned to heaven, could still identify with the cost of living out a worldly Christianity. I mean, now that Jesus Christ has returned to the perfection of intimacy at the Father's right hand, enjoying the glory he had with the Father before the world ever was created, is he now, for all practical purposes, detached from our dilemmas, indifferent to our plight? I mean, now that he's really experiencing glory, is he virtually untouched by the opposition we are enduring for his sake? Does he care? Is he aware? Has he lost sight of us? And the Hebrew writer is saying, not our high priest. Our high priest, even in glory, look at it, is capable of unparalleled understanding and compassion. Why? Because of his experiences as a man. My friends, let me tell you something that I think is a serious concern that people like us are particularly vulnerable to. We tend to think that because Jesus possessed a fully divine nature, he was virtually impervious to temptation. The temptations shot off his chest like so many toy arrows. But that is what we would call a Gnostic view of Jesus Christ. Anything that diminishes the fullness of his humanity. It's 1 John that addresses this in the clearest terms. Listen, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to determine if they are from God. This is how you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit who confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit who does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. In fact, our Protestant forefather, Martin Luther, said that the right way to come to a full understanding of Jesus Christ is to begin with his humanity. And my dear friends, while I do not in any way want to be immodest, the fact is, in the earliest portions of the Gospel of Luke, we are told that Jesus bore in his body the very mark of the old covenant. He was circumcised. The end of Luke chapter 2 tells us that Jesus increased in wisdom and stature. That is, he grew intellectually. Yeah, Jesus had to learn his Hebrew alphabet, you see. Now, my friends, I believe in the deity of Jesus Christ as strongly as anyone. You could put me in a catatonic state and I wouldn't deny the deity of Jesus Christ. So don't go there in your thinking. What I'm telling you, however, is the longer I am a Christian, it is the humanity of Jesus Christ that brings great comfort to my soul. Why? Because I need a priest who can understand me. I need a priest who can identify with my struggles. I need a priest who knows what I'm facing, the pressures that I'm enduring, the temptations that are gripping me. I certainly affirm that Jesus Christ was more than a man, but you must never forget that he was never anything less than a man. He was not a superman. He entered this world as a man. He lived his life as a man. Every challenge he faced, he did so as a man. He is the ultimate man, the epitome of every man. And because of that, right now, my friends, he knows exactly what you need to succeed as a human being in this fallen world.
To succeed as a human being in this fallen world, when all is said and done, is to escape the coming wrath of God against human sinfulness. Notice, it's not so that you can succeed by living out your God-given destiny or succeed by living out your best life now, but rather that Jesus will provide all things the Christian needs to persevere and hold fast the confession of the faith in Jesus until the end. How can Jesus do this? Well, because Jesus was tempted in every primary way humans can be tempted and never once gave in to it.
He has felt the full force of temptation's power. In fact, Hebrews says it like this. He had to be made like his brothers in every respect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. He knows exactly what you need because he's already endured all of it and more. He is the effectual priest. He is the ultimate priest. He is the sympathetic priest, finally. And what I hope will bring you great encouragement this morning. He is the sustaining priest, supplying you with everything necessary to persevere.
Jesus is right now at the right hand of the Father, the right hand of majesty and authority. Hebrews 7:23. The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. So, to whom then is this throne of grace accessible?
Because of the work of our great high priest, Jesus Christ, that throne, that place of sovereignty is a source of grace. Meaning what? That it is accessible to the greatest and most notorious of sinners. And from that throne there are two commodities that you will need to seek again and again, friends, as you attempt to live out a worldly Christianity. First, notice there is mercy to be received. There is mercy from that place, mercy to be received. And what does mercy presuppose? Mercy presupposes failure. So let's admit it. This is the company of the Church of Jesus Christ. We all need mercy today. So let's be done with that default position of the human heart, self-righteousness, and let's acknowledge that we ourselves are indeed the chief of sinners. In this task of persevering, friends, you will fail. You will fall. You will fail. You will fall. No cheap triumphalism here. No hyper-spirituality here. I wonder what this church would be like. I wonder what it would do for Spokane if there was a congregation of people filled with the realization and the open acknowledgement, I'm a sinner in need of mercy. I don't try and hide it. I don't try and look better than I am. This is who I am in all of my fallenness. And his point here is when we do fall and we come before our Father in brokenness, we will receive mercy rather than condemnation. And you know why? It's not because you're so cuddly and wonderful, God just can't help himself. It's because sitting at his right hand is our high priest, submitting the evidence of his redemptive accomplishments. I died for him. I paid for her sin. There's a second commodity to be found at this throne. Grace, available to us at the proper time. That is, at the very moment we need it. You see, if you intend to live out an authentic Christianity in a way that is meaningfully worldly, perseverance for you is the name of the game. And to persevere, you will need mercy for your failures, but you will also need grace for the strength to endure, to withstand all of the opposition, all of the hostility, all of the trouble that will come your way. And my friends, how readily available is this grace and mercy to you? Notice the staggering contrast that's being portrayed here. Who was allowed entrance into the Holy of Holies? Everyone? A few? One man, the high priest. And with what kind of frequency could he enter into that place? Once a year. One man, once a year. Now notice the contrast. Then let us, with confidence, draw near to the throne of grace. Let us, to whom does this us refer? Those who hold fast the confession, those who have Jesus Christ as their high priest, all Christians. And with what kind of frequency, friends, may we come into that real Holy of Holies? The Greek text actually reads like this: let us keep on continually approaching the throne of grace. Let us keep on continually approaching the throne of grace. You see, my friends, you never ever need to fear that you will wear God out. You never ever need to fear that somehow you will exhaust your allotment of grace, that you've just sinned one too many times. The fact is, this is the only way a worldly Christian perseveres. Regularly coming before your Father in prayer, seeking his mercy for your failures and grace for your enduring obedience. Why? Because there at his right hand is your great high priest, the effectual, ultimate, sympathetic, and sustaining priest. Why in the world would you ever consider turning away from him? Any movement away from him is descent and could prove to be, in the end, eternally catastrophic.
God's mercy for our failures and God's grace for our continued obedience. Is that not exactly what we so desperately need to persevere in this world?
And so this is how you survive as a Christian. Moment by moment, day by day, coming before the throne of grace. I need you, Father. I need the strength that only you can provide. Forgive me for my sins on the basis of Jesus Christ and his death on the cross. I need mercy. Have pity on me. Give me what I need to survive in this world in a way that is authentically Christian and meaningfully worldly. It's for you to claim the promise. It's for you to grasp the promise. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. My friends, this is the only way you will persevere as a worldly Christian. The only kind of Christian that Jesus ever envisioned.